The town of Gila Forks baked under the late afternoon sun, the dust curling in lazy spirals along Main Street like smoke from a dying fire. Horses stood tied outside ramshackle buildings, their ears flicking at the flies. A saloon sign hung crooked, one chain snapped, its remaining hinge squealing in the breeze. Inside, the heat was thick and mean, made worse by sweat, cheap whiskey, and the stink of desperation. Voices rose like wolves howling at dusk. "Lemme have a look at the older one." "No, no, I'll take the little one, got a soft spot for blue eyes." The crowd jeered, leered, and laughed. Men pressed against each other, roughened by trail dust and liquor, slapping silver coins into each other's palms, passing bottles between calloused hands. The auctioneer, a greasy man with a tobacco-stained beard, stood behind three girls who were tied at the wrists and looped together like livestock. His voice cracked like a whip. "3 frontier angels, boys. Prime stock. Taken fair and square off a busted wagon, no debts, no kin. Fresh from the road and ready for a warm bed." Clara stood in front, back straight though her legs shook beneath her. Her dress was torn at the hem, streaked with blood and mud. At 19, she was tall and fierce-eyed, but fear made her pale. Her lips moved faintly, counting, maybe praying, but she made no sound. Behind her, June, just 14, clutched the rope that bound them, her eyes darting like a cornered rabbit. Maggie, the youngest, barely 9, sucked her thumb and whimpered, too confused to understand, too young to look away. Clara shifted to block the worst of the crowd's view of her sisters. "Bid starts at $5. Who's first?" A man with a missing ear and a red sash raised his hand. "5 for the little one." "10 for the tall one," shouted another. Clara gritted her teeth. She could smell the rot on their breath even from the stage. She dared a glance to June, saw the terror in her eyes. She had to do something. But her hands were tied. Her strength wasn't enough. Not now. Her father had always told her, "Think smart before you strike. Wild fists don't win against loaded guns." 15 for all three, someone barked. The crowd roared, some laughing, others cursing. The auctioneer held up his hands for calm, the gavel shaking in his grip. Behind the noise, the saloon doors groaned once. Then silence. Then, crack. The doors blasted inward, splinters flying, hinges shrieking as they were torn from the wall. Men spun around, hands going for holsters, but no one fired. Not yet. A shadow filled the doorway, haloed by the dying sun behind him. He stood tall, coat draped heavy with trail dust, a wide hat casting his face in darkness. A long rifle hung from his shoulder, and a revolver rested in his gloved hand, lowered but ready. He walked forward without a word. Clara squinted. The light behind him was blinding. One of the bidders laughed nervously. "What's this, then? Preacher come to save souls?" The stranger didn't flinch. He stopped a few feet from the auctioneer and spoke, quiet and hard. "Cut them loose." The crowd blinked. Murmurs rippled through the room like wind through dry grass. The auctioneer recovered first. "Now hold on, mister. These girls were." The stranger raised the revolver and shot the gavel out of his hand. The wood exploded in a sharp crack. The crowd erupted into motion, chairs scraped, bottles dropped, but still, no one drew. Not yet. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, eyes scanning every man in the room like he was measuring coffins. "You sell cattle. You sell land. But you don't sell children." A man in the back shouted, "Who the hell are you to say?" The stranger didn't even turn his head. "Name's Ward." The room stilled again. The name passed between the men like a chill. Caleb Ward. A rancher out near Coyote Ridge. Fought in the war. Lost everything in a barn fire, wife, child. Said to have killed a dozen raiders in one night with nothing but a knife. Some said he was mad. Others swore he was the devil's debt come due. He holstered the revolver, slung the rifle down. "Last time I ask," he said. "Cut them loose." The auctioneer's lip trembled. He nodded to a lanky boy at his side, who fumbled with a knife and stepped up. Clara flinched when the blade came near, but it only sliced the ropes. Her hands dropped free. Blood rushed back into her fingers in burning pins and needles. June gasped and clutched her wrist. Maggie simply stared at Caleb, wide-eyed. Caleb reached into his coat and dropped a satchel on the table. It hit with a metallic thunk. "More than they're worth." "More than you are," he said to the auctioneer. "And if any of you think to follow us, I'll leave your bones for the buzzards." Then he turned to Clara. "Get the girls. We ride." Clara didn't move. He met her gaze. "You coming, or staying for round 2? Her pride bristled, but fear beat it down. She grabbed June's hand, then Maggie's, and stepped off the platform. Outside, the street was eerily quiet. Even the horses seemed to sense something had shifted. Caleb helped the girls onto a single mare, lifting each with gentle strength. He handed Clara the reins. "You ride front. Hold on. She hesitated, then climbed up. He mounted behind her on his own gelding and gave a short whistle. The horses turned. The saloon doors creaked shut behind them. They rode out into the coming dark. For miles, nothing was said. The road stretched long and broken, the sun bleeding red over the mesas. Clara's mind raced. Who was this man? What did he want? Why them? The clink of coins in that satchel still echoed in her ears. Was this just another transaction? A different kind of trap? She turned, whispering so only her sisters could hear. Don't fall asleep. Don't let go. Caleb glanced back now and then, watching the horizon. At a creek bed, he stopped and let the horses drink. He moved quietly, methodically, like a man who'd spent too long alone. Clara climbed down, legs stiff. She held Maggie's hand tight. You knew our father? She asked. Caleb looked at her for a long time. We served together. Long ago. He's dead. I know. Then why help us? He paused, eyes distant. The wind rustled the cottonwoods above. Because someone didn't help when they should've. That's reason enough. He dropped a sack of dried meat and hardtack near the fire pit, then walked off into the shadows. Clara watched him disappear. June shivered, clinging to her side. Maggie fell asleep wrapped in her sister's shawl. Night deepened. The stars came out, sharp and cold. Coyotes cried in the distance. Clara sat near the fire but not too close, arms around her knees, eyes locked on the dark where Caleb had gone. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But she was alive. Her sisters were alive. That was more than she dared hope for just hours ago. A breeze stirred the flames. Sparks danced like fireflies. She whispered to no one. Don't fail them. Don't you dare. A twig snapped in the dark. She turned sharply. Caleb emerged, rifle slung over his shoulder, a rabbit in one hand. He tossed it at her feet. Cook it. We ride at first light. He dropped onto the ground, back against a boulder, and pulled his hat low. Clara stared at the rabbit, then at him. You don't give orders. I'm not one of your soldiers. He didn't open his eyes. You want them to survive, you listen. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Her sisters slept close together, June's hand on Maggie's chest, rising and falling in unison. Clara picked up the knife. She started skinning the rabbit. Her hands weren't steady, but they were sure. Her father had taught her once. He'd smiled when she tried to gut a trout and cut her thumb. You'll get it, girl. You just need cause. She had cause now. The meat hissed on the fire. Caleb didn't move. In that moment, with the scent of smoke in her hair and blood still drying on her wrists, Clara made herself a silent promise. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And she'd see it through, no matter what waited on the trail ahead. The morning broke slow and cold. Mist curled in thin ribbons along the creek bed, and frost glistened on the saddle leather. Caleb had already packed the fire out and was cinching the last strap on his gear when Clara opened her eyes. She sat up fast, searching for her sisters. June and Maggie were curled beneath a blanket beside her, still sleeping soundly. You snore, Caleb said without looking. Clara narrowed her eyes. I do not. You do, he said, lifting Maggie gently from the ground and placing her into the saddle. Like a bear cub. She almost smiled but caught herself. The tension of the night before hadn't left her, it had only settled deeper into her chest. She climbed into the saddle with June and looped her arm protectively around her sister's waist. Where are we going? She asked. West. Where men are too busy surviving to act like wolves. That place doesn't exist. Maybe not. But it's far from Gila Forks. They rode out under a pale sun, the light cutting gold through skeletal trees. The land stretched wide and empty, the only sounds the steady clop of hooves and the soft jingle of tack. The silence wasn't comfortable. It was waiting. Caleb said little. He rode like a man used to watching all directions at once. His eyes flicked constantly to the ridgelines, the shadows in the trees, the open ground ahead. Clara studied him when he wasn't looking. He moved like someone who had lost before, carefully, as though even stillness might cost him something. By midday, the sun burned hot. June's cheeks reddened, and Maggie began to whimper. Caleb pulled up beneath a cluster of pinyon pines, where the shade pooled thick and cool. We'll rest here. Clara slid down and helped the girls drink from the canteen. Caleb knelt and opened a small cloth satchel, revealing strips of dried venison and a handful of dried berries. Maggie sat cross-legged, chewing slowly. Her voice was soft. Are we going home? Clara stilled. We are, she said carefully. Is Pa there? Clara's throat tightened. She looked at Caleb, whose gaze was cast low. No, Clara whispered. But we're going somewhere safe. Maggie didn't ask again. She leaned against June, eyes fluttering shut. They pressed on, deeper into the wilderness. The trail narrowed to a game path, winding through rocky passes and gullies clogged with scrub. At dusk, they found a narrow hollow nestled between bluffs. Caleb took a rope and made a perimeter, tying old tin cans with rocks inside to alert them of movement. Clara watched him work. Expecting company? Always. From Gila Forks? Could be. Do you think they'll follow us? Caleb paused, tying the last knot. If they're smart, no. If they're angry enough, maybe. Clara gathered brush for the fire. She kept her sisters close, watching every shadow stretch across the hollow like it had teeth. That night, the coyotes came closer. Their yips and howls circled in the distance. Caleb stood with his rifle, unmoving, his silhouette sharp against the firelight. Clara sat with her sisters, listening to the night press in on them like a hand to the throat. The fire died to embers. The stars blazed white overhead. And Clara couldn't sleep. She rose quietly and approached Caleb, who didn't turn. You said you knew our father. I did. What was he like? Before the war? Caleb's voice was low. Quiet. Stubborn. Good shot. He talked about you three all the time. Clara nodded, arms folded tight. He died saving us from raiders. My ma died last winter. We were heading to a cousin in Dawson's Hollow. Then the axle snapped. I heard. She looked at him. Why do this? Really? Why us? He didn't answer at first. Then he said, because I couldn't save mine. A gust of wind made the trees whisper. Clara said nothing more. She returned to the fire and lay between her sisters. But sleep never came. The next day, the trail vanished into broken foothills. Caleb dismounted and walked ahead, leading the horses on foot. Clara followed behind, every muscle sore, lips cracked, fingers blistered from the reins. Maggie cried once but was too tired for more. They reached a ridgeline by midday. The view stretched wide, a canyon below, steep and narrow, carved by centuries of wind and rain. Caleb studied it a long time. We'll cross there. Clara looked down the rocky slope. That doesn't look like a trail. It's not. The descent was brutal. The horses struggled for footing, hooves skidding on shale. Maggie clung to Clara like a limpet. Caleb moved with practiced efficiency, guiding his horse one careful step at a time. Clara's heart pounded with each shift of stone beneath them. One slip could kill them all. Halfway down, a rattle split the air. Ch. Caleb froze. Stay still, he said quietly. The sound came again, closer. He moved fast, sweeping Clara behind him, rifle raised. The rattlesnake coiled a few yards off, fat and mean, scales glinting like hammered brass. One shot. A pop like thunder. The snake's head burst in a flash of red. Maggie screamed. June whimpered, gripping Clara tight. Caleb lowered the rifle. Keep moving. They reached the canyon floor by nightfall. Clara's legs trembled with every step. The air was cooler here, the walls rising high on either side like the ribs of some ancient beast. They camped beside a small stream. Caleb checked the tracks in the sand, frowning. Cougar's been through here. Fresh. Clara paled. What do we do? Don't stray far. Don't make noise. Fire stays small. Maggie cried herself to sleep that night. June stared at the sky in silence. Clara lay awake, watching the shadows shift against the stone. She wanted to believe they'd make it. She wanted to trust Caleb. But the road kept getting worse. And she feared the worst hadn't even come yet. The next morning, they found blood. Not theirs. Animal, but recent. Caleb knelt and ran 2 fingers through it. Wolves. Clara swallowed. They close? Probably trailing a kill. But it'll bring other things. Like what? He stood. Men. They moved faster. Caleb didn't stop to rest, didn't stop to eat. The canyon narrowed, and every sound bounced back double. Clara kept her sisters close, but her feet were raw, and her throat burned. By dusk, they reached an opening, flatland stretching wide beyond the canyon mouth. Grass waved in golden sheets. But Caleb halted them with a raised hand. Smoke. Thin, distant, but unmistakable. Clara saw it too. A thread of black against the evening sky. He handed her the reins. Wait here. No. He turned to her. I'm not asking. She stood firm. And I'm not staying. You think I'm letting you walk into danger alone? Not after what we've seen. His jaw tightened. He studied her, then nodded once. Stay behind me. They tied the horses in a thicket and crept forward, moving low. The smoke came from a small camp nestled in a hollow. 2 men sat by the fire, rifles nearby, one stirring a pot. Caleb and Clara circled wide, listening. They passed through 2 days ago, one man said. Said they lost M in the canyon. The other spat. Them girls worth a fortune to the right man. I say we keep hunting. Caleb's eyes darkened. He turned to Clara. Get the girls. We leave now. Quiet. They returned to the thicket. June and Maggie were half asleep. Clara roused them, whispered for silence. Caleb saddled the horses with trembling urgency. Then a snap of a twig. Shouts. Hey! Gunfire ripped through the trees. Caleb fired once, twice, shadows crumpled. He pulled Maggie up onto his saddle and yelled, "Ride!" Clara swung June up and kicked the mare into motion. They bolted through the grasslands, bullets snapping through the dusk. The horses thundered across the flatland, sweat flying, hearts hammering. Behind them, one last shot echoed, and then silence. They didn't stop until night swallowed the land. Clara slid from the saddle, legs giving out beneath her. She gasped for breath, clutching June. Caleb dismounted, holding Maggie close. He looked around, scanning the horizon, then met Clara's eyes. "You all right?" "No," she said. "But we're alive." He nodded. Clara walked to him, took Maggie from his arms, and held her tight. Then, without another word, she began to cry. Not loud. Not for long. But deep, like something cracking open inside her. Caleb looked away. The wind blew over the prairie. They were still breathing. But the road ahead didn't promise mercy. Only more ground. More danger. And maybe, if they were lucky, redemption. They didn't speak again that night. But when Caleb sat beside the fire, Clara sat near him. Closer than before. The prairie rolled like waves beneath a bruised sky. It had rained in the night, a cold, hard curtain that soaked their gear and carved dark veins through the dirt. Now the storm had passed, but the air hung heavy, thick with the scent of wet grass and something else. A tension. Like the earth itself was holding its breath. They'd ridden far from the canyon, but Caleb didn't relax. His eyes were constantly moving, scanning every ridge, every patch of wind-tossed sage. The girls rode quiet, their small bodies slumped with exhaustion. Clara had stopped counting the days. Time stretched, blurred, marked only by hunger, by pain, by the faint, stubborn hope of reaching safety. That morning, she caught Caleb studying a scrap of cloth, a strip of red gingham, worn at the edges. "That from your daughter?" she asked softly. He didn't flinch. Didn't answer. "You had a family. What happened?" He tucked the cloth away. "Same thing that happens to most who settle too close to the frontier." Clara didn't press. The silence said more than words. They made camp near a dry creek bed, hidden by cottonwoods. Caleb dug a shallow pit for the fire, using stones to hide the glow. Clara tended the girls, wiping sweat from June's brow, wrapping Maggie's foot where a thorn had cut deep. "She's fevered," Clara murmured. Caleb came over, crouched, and pressed his palm to the girl's head. "We need to rest a day. Let her recover." "She doesn't have a day." His jaw clenched. "There's a place. Half a day north. Old station, abandoned, but might be shelter. Water. Maybe medicine." Clara stood, eyes fierce. "Then we go now." Night crept in fast, turning the land into shadow and silhouette. They rode hard. Maggie's fever worsened, her little body limp in Caleb's arms. The moon rose pale above them, casting everything in silver and ash. By midnight, the station appeared on the horizon like a ghost. Crumbling walls, shattered roof, but still standing. Caleb dismounted first, rifle raised, scanning the ruins. Then he nodded. They rushed inside. It smelled of old wood and rat droppings, but it was shelter. Clara laid Maggie down on a blanket. Her skin was slick, her breath shallow. "Water," Clara whispered. Caleb returned with a tin cup. Clara tried to coax Maggie to drink. The girl's lips barely moved. Then, a sound, soft, distant. "Hooves." Caleb rose instantly. "They found us." "How? How could they? Track the shot, or the campfire, or just luck?" He peered through a crack in the boarded window. 4 riders. Maybe 5. "We need to hold them off." Clara's hands trembled. With 2 half-starved horses, a sick child, and no walls worth a damn. He looked at her. "You still have that fire, Clara?" Her chin lifted. "Enough." He handed her a second rifle. "Then let's burn it." The girls were hidden in the back room, beneath old hay and covered in oilcloth. Clara kissed them both and whispered promises she couldn't be sure she'd keep. Then she joined Caleb near the door. The wind picked up, whistling through broken slats. "I'll take the east window," she said. Caleb gave a tight nod. "If I fall, you won't." Gunfire shattered the silence. A bullet split the frame beside Clara's cheek. She ducked, raised the rifle, fired back. 1 rider toppled. Another cursed and returned fire. The station trembled with the sound of violence. Clara moved like she'd been born for this moment, eyes sharp, breath steady, each shot deliberate. Caleb fought like a wounded animal, fierce, raw, unrelenting. A Molotov hit the roof. Fire erupted in the rafters. Smoke filled the room, thick and choking. "They're trying to burn us out!" Clara shouted. "We hold!" Caleb roared. Another bullet punched through the wall and grazed his arm. He staggered, gritted his teeth, and fired again. 2 riders remained, circling. Then, a cry. Inside. Bring the girl. We take her and they'll crawl. Caleb's eyes flared. They're after Maggie. Clara's voice shook. No. Not again. She ran to the back room. Flames danced above. Smoke curled along the ceiling. She found June crouched, arms around her sister. Maggie's eyes were open, but barely. Clara lifted her, pressing her to her chest. A voice boomed from outside. You've got 10 seconds, or we burn it all to hell. Clara stepped into the main room, Maggie in her arms. Her dress was scorched, her face streaked with soot. Caleb stood bleeding, smoke swirling around him like a storm. Go, he said. Take the back. Run. What about you? He looked at her. I've got 1 shot left. I'll make it count. Tears welled in her eyes. You can't. He stepped close, placed the red gingham scrap in her hand. My daughter's name was Lucy. Then he turned and kicked the door open. Gunfire exploded. Clara ran. She tore through the back, smoke chasing her like a beast. June followed, barefoot, coughing, clutching the ragged rifle. They ran into the trees. Behind them, the station burned, red and gold against the night sky. They didn't stop running. Not until dawn. The sky bled pink over the hills. Maggie stirred in Clara's arms, whispering something Clara couldn't understand. Her fever had broken. Her skin was cool. They found a spring, hidden in the folds of the land. Clara knelt, soaked a cloth, cleaned her sister's face. June sat beside her. Is he gone? Clara stared at the horizon. I don't know. The wind was still. The trees rustled gently. I saw him fall, June said. But he shot 2 more before they got him. Clara closed her eyes. The sun climbed. By midday, a rider approached. Clara rose, rifle ready, heart in her throat. But it wasn't an outlaw. It was a woman. Older, with gray in her braids and a scar across her cheek. She dismounted slowly, raising both hands. Name's Willa. You're Clara, right? Caleb sent word you might be coming. Clara lowered the rifle. He's gone. Willa nodded. He was always too brave for his own good. She looked at the girls, then back at Clara. There's a place. Not far. Safe. Folks who owe Caleb. Folks who help. Clara's legs almost gave out. Willa stepped forward. Come on, girl. You've carried fire through hell. Now let someone else carry you. Clara looked down at her sisters, alive, safe. Then at the cloth still clutched in her fist. She nodded. And they walked toward a future uncertain, but possible. The fire behind them. The fire within, still burning.